there, welcome to Planet America. Here in the Situation Room, I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and yes, we've got another situation.
U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. President Trump urging the Iranian people to take control over their government now.
We heard the president lay out what he wants here. He says regime change.
Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
Epic fury, America's self-proclaimed president of peace goes to war with Iran.
Also this week, the Clintons face some awkward questions over Jeffrey Epstein. But first...
In January 2021, as Donald Trump's first term ended in defeat at the polls and disgrace in the eyes of many for refusing to accept that loss, he delivered a dispirited address in which he outlined what he saw as his achievements.
I am especially proud to be the first president in decades who has started no new wars.
Trump had been critical of the Bush administration's forever wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and many MAGA supporters shared Trump's America First brand of isolationism. And again, during Trump's comeback campaign in 2024, this was a pretty constant theme.
Under Trump, we will have no more wars, no more disruptions, and we will have prosperity and peace for all.
But since returning to power in 2025, something has changed. Short, sharp strikes like last June's stealth bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities and January's raid to capture the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro seem to have emboldened the previously reticent commander-in-chief to flex America's military muscles. Here's what he said less than a week ago during his State of the Union address.
As president, I will make peace wherever I can, but I will never hesitate to confront threats to America wherever we must. That's why in a breakthrough operation last June, the United States military obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program with an attack on Iranian soil known as Operation Midnight Hammer.
So, while on Tuesday night Trump was maintaining Iran's nuclear program had been obliterated, by early Saturday he'd decided it still posed an unacceptable threat to America.
They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland.
Unlike predecessors such as George W. Bush, Trump made no effort to rally international or American public support for this war. He did not seek a UN resolution or even US congressional approval. He just did it.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. And
also, unlike Bush in Afghanistan and Iraq, there's no indication that President Trump will order American boots on the ground. Good wars last days, not decades, in Trump's estimation. He wants regime change in Iran, but of the DIY kind.
Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
And despite confirmation that one of those bombs did kill Iran's supreme leader, 86-year-old Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, it's far from clear that the government will be the Iranian people's to take. In January, thousands, possibly more than 30,000 Iranian protesters were killed in a brutal regime crackdown after Trump himself called on them to keep protesting, take over your institutions, promising then help is on its way. So it is possible those Iranians who might have deposed the Iranian regime now are already dead. It's also possible that, like in Venezuela, a change in leader, not regime, will be enough for Trump to declare mission accomplished, Chaz.
Could be, John. Just today, Trump told The Atlantic that he plans to talk to Iran's new leadership. They want to talk, and I've agreed to talk, so I will be talking to them, he said. They should have done it sooner. They waited too long. It sort of reminded me of an article from the Wall Street Journal last week, John, that said that Trump was weighing an initial limited military strike on Iran to force it to meet his demands for a new nuclear deal. A first step that would be designed to pressure Tehran into an agreement. Now, that was pretty serious for an initial limited strike, John, but maybe these attacks could still be contained to an extent, although Netanyahu's still saying they're going to escalate those, so we'll see about that. I know Trump 2013 would be back in negotiations, though. Back then, Trump tweeted, "Obama will attack Iran because of his inability to negotiate properly, not skilled." How things change, eh? And I'm sure the American people would also support more negotiations. Reuters Ipsos had the poll out today. It went out as soon as the strikes began. And they found only 27% of Americans approving of the strikes compared to 43% disapproving, with 56% of people thinking that Trump is too willing to use military force to advance US interests, including 60% of independents also thinking Trump was too trigger happy. This is consistent with most polling until now. A month ago, only 21% of people favoured an attack on Iran, with 49% opposed. Go back one more month to just after the Iranian protesters were being massacred, and even then, 70% of Americans believe the US shouldn't get involved militarily in Iran. But those numbers, they can change rapidly depending on the perceived success of the operation, John. Take Venezuela, for instance. In late December last year, YouGov found only 22% supported using military force to overthrow Maduro, very similar numbers to now in Iran. But when the overthrow had successfully occurred with minimal blowback, on the 9th of January, almost twice as many people, 40% of them, supported the use of military force to overthrow Maduro. Now, that intervention was never popular, but right now the Iran war is extraordinarily unpopular. As I say, though, this is still early days, sadly.
Former First Lady, Senator and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was compelled to testify last week before a House committee looking into the Epstein affair, which she was none too pleased about, given that she claims not to know the guy from a bar of soap.
I never met Jeffrey Epstein, never had any connection or communication with him. I knew Ghislaine Maxwell casually as an acquaintance. But whatever they asked me, I did my very best to respond.
An acquaintance. Reporters wanted to know, how was it then that a year after Epstein had been released from jail the first time, Ghislaine Maxwell was at Chelsea Clinton's 2010 wedding?
She came as the +1, the guest of someone who was invited.
Did +1s really just turn up without being registered or checked for a wedding involving a who's who of American politics and finance? 2 years after Epstein's guilty plea to watered-down sex trafficking charges? Maybe. Turns out Maxwell was at the Clinton wedding with her new boyfriend at the time, Ted Waite, a tax-billionaire, a friend of the Clintons and a prolific Clinton Foundation donor. So maybe it's just a case of money talking. But that was just the curtain raiser. The main event came the next day when, for the first time in history, a former American president testified before a congressional committee under subpoena. Both Clintons had initially resisted giving a deposition to this House Oversight Committee, calling it invalid, unenforceable and politically motivated, but ultimately they agreed to appear in the face of potential contempt charges. This committee wanted to know a lot more about President Clinton's association with the convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. In Clinton's telling of that, well, there wasn't much to it.
First, I had no idea of the crimes Epstein was committing. No matter how many photos they show of me, I have two things that at the end of the day matter far more than any interpretation of 20-year-old photos. I know what I saw, and more importantly, what I didn't see. And I know what I did, and more importantly, what I didn't do. I saw nothing and I did nothing wrong.
If you say so, Baba. And this is the photo from Epstein's own files. President Clinton there in a hot tub with a woman whose face has been blacked out. Another undated image, but possibly taken at the same time, shows Epstein's co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell paddling about in the pool with Bill Clinton and an unidentified woman. During his sworn testimony, President Clinton reportedly denied knowing who that woman in the hot tub with him was, not Ghislaine but the other one, and told lawmakers under oath that he did not have sexual relations with her. Now, where have we heard that before?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Yeah, you did. So, Bill Clinton has a big credibility problem, even if 28 years later, he's now actually telling the truth. President Clinton was reportedly asked about his name appearing in the flight logs of Epstein's plane and about Epstein's name appearing in Clinton's White House visitor logs. Clinton also reportedly told the committee that now President Trump told him in the early 2000s at a golf tournament that he had a falling out with Epstein over a land deal. President Trump has claimed that he ended his long friendship with Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein stole some young female employees from his Mar-a-Lago club. So that possible rewriting of history might provide an opening for Democrats on this committee who want President Trump to be deposed.
We are now asking and demanding that President Trump officially come in and testify in front of the Oversight Committee.
And will Republican Committee Chairman James Comer now try to depose President Trump? Seems unlikely.
From all the evidence I've seen, he's been exonerated for a long time.
President Trump himself had a rather interesting reaction to Bill and Hillary Clinton being hauled before this committee. Chaz, was this sympathy or self-interest?
I like him, and I don't like seeing him deposed.
I reckon he can see those 2027 subpoenas coming his way, John.
He likes the Clintons? Make him say that under oath.
Talking about potential Trump concerns, we learned a bit more this week about those allegations against Trump in the Epstein Files. Remember last week we told you about the Department of Justice withholding summaries of 3 FBI interviews with a woman who alleged Trump assaulted her. The DOJ only released a 4th interview with that woman where her allegations were solely about Jeffrey Epstein. Some interesting choices there. Well, the DOJ's explained these omissions by saying any document withheld is either a duplicate, privileged, or part of an ongoing federal investigation. Even though the interviews mentioning Trump were clearly none of those 3. So the DOJ put out another statement and suggested the documents were withheld because of a protective order in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Unfortunately, the DOJ in court had already acknowledged that those documents were not subject to a protective order, so make of all that what you will. The cover-up was a waste of time anyway. The Guardian's already got their hands on these interviews. Apparently, the woman said she was sexually abused by Epstein from the age of 13 in 1983 while she was living in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Now, for what it's worth, Epstein's brother Mark told The Guardian he had no knowledge of his brother spending summers on Hilton Head in the early 80s, and he said he would have known if Jeff had gone there. Also, there is no evidence that Trump and Epstein knew each other back in 1983. Trump told New York Magazine in 2002 that he met Epstein 15 years before then, which would work out to be 1987 if Trump could do maths. Once again, you make of that what you will. Either way, the woman said Epstein introduced her to Trump and some other guys back then in the early 80s, and she said when they were alone, Trump said something like, "Let me teach you how little girls are supposed to be," before attempting to sexually assault her. And that was when she said she bit him. We should also note that someone matching the woman's details has faced several fraud and theft charges before, as well as a felony charge for exploitation of an elderly person. And while last week we did tell you she successfully settled a lawsuit with the Epstein estate, The Guardian says no. She actually dropped her claims from the lawsuit, and they don't know if she actually did receive a financial settlement. Now, I'm not trying to push you either way on that allegation, but that is where it's at the moment. By contrast, I am trying to push you to believe that Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is full of crap. Recall, this is what Lutnick said last year about Jeffrey Epstein.
And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. Really? So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
And this is what Lutnick said after the Epstein Files revealed that he was lying on that podcast and he'd actually taken his whole family, including his 4 kids, on the trip to Epstein Island in 2012.
Over the next 14 years, I met him 2 other times that I can recall. 2 times. And that is none for 6 years. So 6 years later, I met him, and then a year and a half after that, I met him, and never again.
At the time, it was noted that only 5 days after Lutnick visited Epstein Island with his family, both Epstein and Lutnick invested in the same digital ad company called Adfin. But one of Lutnick's buddies said that Lutnick was only a minority investor in Adfin and he didn't have any knowledge of who the other investors were at the time of doing the deal. Right, so no knowledge of Epstein's involvement at all, yeah? Okay. Explain to me then this email thread 6 years later in 2018 from HWL, or Howard William Lutnick, marked as being sent from Lutnick's personal company, mind you, which began with Epstein writing, "On another note, what do you think the prospects for Adfin are?" Does that sound like they hadn't spoken for 6 years? And Lutnick responded, "Producing revenue finally. This is their year. Next 12 months, they need to become economically self-sufficient." Epstein says, "Thanks. How long until Sherry's ready? I can buy my guest house." And Lutnick says, "Probably 4 years. We'd need to actually do something for it to ever finish. Haven't even picked an architect designer yet. Too much construction. Just finished this house." Now, I don't know what any of that means, but it sounds very much like they knew each other quite well, doesn't it? And also, they knew about their business relationship. And if that's not evidence enough, how about in 2017 when fund manager John Paulson emailed Epstein to say, "As you may know, it's our privilege to be honouring our good friend Howard W. Lutnick, chairman and CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. I want to make sure that as a close friend of the Lutnicks, you're aware of the event and have the opportunity to support them." And then he gave some donation options, to which Epstein responded, $50K, as in a $50,000 donation to support a supposed stranger. And finally, there's this photo, which popped up in the Epstein Files briefly and sure looks like Howard Lutnick on Epstein Island with Epstein. When was it taken? We don't know. But we do know that at some point DOJ deleted it. And when CBS asked them about the photo being deleted, DOJ then immediately restored it. How about that? DOJ said the photo was part of a batch of files that were flagged for nudity, even though it had no nudity, and that it was uploaded again with necessary redactions, even though it had no redactions. Maybe, John, that committee should forget just for a second about Hillary Clinton and have a chat with Howard Lutnick, as well as some of these DOJ characters who are covering for the administration.
Good tip, Chaz. Now, to this week's primaries in Texas, which will determine which candidates face off for a Senate seat in Texas, which could in turn determine which party holds the majority in the next Congress. So the stakes are high. This seat is currently held by Republican John Cornyn, a 74-year-old 4-term senator, something of a holdover from the George W. Bush era. He's being challenged for the Republican nomination by Ken Paxton. He's the Texas State Attorney General, very much a Trump MAGA era kind of candidate. There's also Wesley Hunt in the race. He's a congressman and retired Army captain. Now, polls are showing a pretty tight contest with Ken Paxton in the lead, and so John Cornyn is now taking off the gloves.
It's voting time, so let's cut through the bullshit. Crooked Ken Paxton cheated on his wife. She's divorcing him on biblical grounds. So now Paxton's wrecking another home, sleeping around with a married mother of 7. And remember this, Crooked Ken has increased his net worth by as much as 7,000% since taking office. And his actions in office, even more troubling.
John, that was restrained compared to the scaremongering filth being peddled by John Cornyn's super PAC.
Crooked Ken Paxton is soft on radical Islam. The lawyer Crooked Ken Paxton used to protect himself during impeachment is the same lawyer defending the radical Islamic Epic City project. That's the same project promising Sharia law in Texas. And that's not all. Ken Paxton used his office to send over $2.5 million to organizations resettling Afghan refugees into Texas. Crooked Ken Paxton is soft on radical Islam.
That's a long bow, but still, crooked Ken Paxton is scandal-prone, to say the least, including, but not limited to, a felony securities fraud investigation that was ultimately settled.
Yes, Paxton was indicted for securities fraud, but don't forget Paxton also faced a whistleblower lawsuit from 7 of his own staff accusing him of abuse of office, bribery and other crimes. And don't forget he was also impeached by a bunch of Texas Republicans in 2023. And also don't forget that extramarital affair, because John Cornyn clearly has not forgotten that.
Yeah, right. So it's not surprising that some Republicans fear Ken Paxton would be a weaker candidate than either Cornyn or Wes Hunt against a Democrat in November. With no candidate near the required 50% threshold, though, in the polls at least, a costly runoff Republican primary is almost certain.
Yeah, that Republican runoff would be held in May, and it could give the Democrats a $20 million head start in fundraising while it's going on. Not to mention, it could create some bruises for Texas Republicans in November.
Yeah, certainly could. On the Democratic side, things are pretty interesting as well. They do feel that Texas might flip this year for the first time in decades, despite losing to Cornyn 6 years ago by almost 10 percentage points. This time, the Democratic contenders are US Representative Jasmine Crockett and State Representative James Tallarico.
Our students, our educators deserve a lot better in this state. That's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate, so we can provide real leadership for our schools, for our teachers, and for our students.
And I got to make sure that everyone in the state of Texas knows that I am going to work for this so that I can work for them.
Crockett is arguably the more progressive of the two, certainly the more combative. Tallarico may have greater appeal to moderates and independents, maybe even some Republicans. Crockett leads in the average of polls, although this week, bit of encouragement for both sides.
A new poll has James Tallarico leading over Jasmine Crockett a day after a poll showed Crockett in the lead.
And early voting turnout has broken records already, with the Democrats outpacing Republicans overall by more than 70,000 votes, 665,000 to 593. In the average of polls, though, each Republican narrowly beats both Democrats, with Wesley Hunt actually doing better than either Cornyn or Paxton, who's just 1 point in front of Crockett and Tallarico, although a general election poll earlier this month gave Crockett a 4-point lead over Ken Paxton. Hence, Democrat hopes and Republican fears in November, Chaz.
Yeah, the possibilities in Texas are endless at the moment. I'm not sure I do agree, though, that Crockett's more progressive than Tallarico. Tallarico is a Bernie Sanders-style populist, and some activists have accused Crockett of being too close to Israel. The biggest difference between the two, I do agree with you, is their style. Tallarico's an, sharks reaching across the aisle type. He wears his religious training on his sleeve. He's a pastor. Crockett's definitely not a pastor. She's best known for aggressive viral takedowns of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Ms. Crockett.
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling, if someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad-built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
Chairman, I make a motion to strike those words.
I don't think that's
I'm trying to find clarification on what qualifies.
Chairman, motion to strike those words.
I had no idea what you just said.
We're not gonna do this. Look, you guys earlier literally just
you just voted to do it.
Y'all did it first, so you don't want to talk about
voted to do it.
Order.
I'm trying to get clarification.
That's very much her style. Crockett also famously referred to wheelchair-bound Governor Greg Abbott as Governor Hot Wheels. In fact, some suggest the Republicans intentionally lured Crockett into the race by releasing a series of polls that suggested she would perform strongly if she entered the race. Did they trick Crockett into running because they thought she'd be an easy beat? I don't know, but it's notable that Governor Hot Wheels has been running a lot of seemingly unnecessary ads just before the Democrats vote, building Crockett up as a Democratic hero.
AOC, Bernie Sanders, Jasmine Crockett, the new radical left. Some even call themselves socialists, and they want control.
And John Cornyn wasn't exactly being coy when Crockett entered the race, saying, "Am I hiding my glee? I'll try to wipe the smile off my face. I'd say it's a gift." But then again, Cornyn would say that. He's old school, whereas Crockett's a more modern creation. Meanwhile, Tallarico, even though he's young, is also a bit old school. He's commanding a huge war chest, $21 million compared to Crockett's $4.5 million. But even with all that cash, he was still likely trailing the race until Tonight Show host Steve Colbert told his audience on February 16 that CBS refused to air his interview with Tallarico due to pressure from Trump's Federal Communications Commission. Colbert put the interview on YouTube, where it received 9 million views, more than 3 times the number of people who typically watch Colbert on TV. And in the next 24 hours, Tallarico raised $2.5 million, as well as a hell of a lot of attention. And this was the day before early voting started. So how this all pans out, anyone's guess, John.
Yeah, for sure. For more on this, we did speak to Elaine Godrey. She's the national political reporter for The Atlantic. She's been covering this campaign in Texas. Elaine, to what extent do you think these 2 Texas Senate primaries are also a vote on the future identity of both major parties?
This is why this race on both sides has gotten so much attention, because both primaries are sort of existential battles for each party. So on the right, you have Ken Paxton, John Cornyn. John Cornyn is not really a beloved figure among the MAGA right. He's a bit of an old school Republican, even though he is an ally of Trump as well, but the MAGA movement has been very critical of him. And so a lot of them think we should vote for Ken Paxton, who's this sort of much more MAGA firebrand type. But he comes to the race with a ton of baggage, including several alleged affairs on his wife. That's sort of the most recent thing. He's been impeached. And so he's sort of, his rap sheet is very long. I would say a lot of MAGA voters, at least the ones that I talk to down in Texas, they are not happy with their choices, but they do have to choose. So that is its own kind of existential race. On the left, you have a much more perfect, I would say, microcosm of the question the Democrats are facing right now, which is, what kind of fighter do we want? What kind of fighter do the Democrats need against Trump and against Trumpism going forward? You have Jasmine Crockett on the one hand, who is a firebrand, as I've experienced personally. She's often on TV. She's often insulting the president, insulting his allies. She is a real Trumpian figure in some ways. Then you have James Tallarico, who is a lot less well known. He's a state lawmaker in Texas. He's a lot more about peace and love and quoting the Bible, and he's sort of a faith-forward leader. He talks a lot more about bipartisanship, talks a lot more about economic populism as his message instead of a sort of anti-Trump message. So how Democrats choose between those two will be really important. It'll tell us a little bit, at least, about what kind of fighter they're looking for.
Elaine, the behaviour of Republicans suggests that they think that Jasmine Crockett would be easier to beat in the general election than James Tallarico. Do you have any sense whether they're right about that?
I think they are correct about that. In Texas, Jasmine Crockett's unfavorables are very high. So Republican voters, a lot of independent voters do not like her, even though a lot of Democrats love her. Tallarico does not have that problem. He is pretty well liked and he is not hated by Republicans. So I think Republicans boosting Jasmine Crockett is definitely for a specific reason. They see her as easy to beat. I think if the race comes down to someone like Ken Paxton, while he's the MAGA candidate, he also comes with all this baggage. A lot of people just don't like him. They see him as a bad person. This is going to be perhaps Democrats' best shot to win in Texas. If it's a wave year for Democrats, if it's Ken Paxton as the Republican nominee. Democrats, especially, voters on the ground, they're really thinking, they're making this calculation. They're thinking, okay, I like James Tallarico. I also like Jasmine Crockett. Who could beat Ken Paxton, though? Who could appeal to more Republicans in Texas, which is what you have to do to win in that state. So I think Republicans are probably smart to be pushing the less popular candidate to sort of hope that she wins, because a lot is riding on this for them. On the other hand, I think that you'll hear from her and her team that Republicans are afraid of her specifically because of how energetic her voters are. I don't think that's true. I don't think Republicans are afraid of Jasmine Crockett. I think this is a very calculated move. They think she's the weaker candidate.
Texas, of course, has been on the Democrats' wish list for a long time now, but they haven't won a statewide election since the early 1990s. Ultimately, will this contest come down to demographics, or could the individual candidates determine who wins?
I think if the Republican candidate is John Cornyn, who's this well-known Republican senator. I think he'll probably win, no matter who the Democrat is on the other side. I think there's strong enough name ID for him, strong enough loyalty to him, even though a lot of the president's supporters don't like him. I think he would pull it out. If this campaign in November comes down to Ken Paxton versus somebody else, and that somebody else is Tallarico, I think you've got yourself a tough race. I think that's one where every reporter in the United States will be in Texas for that race, because that'll be a crazy close race. Jasmine Crockett, I don't know, she would have a shot too. I think it's less likely, just given her unfavorables in the state and the fact that she doesn't talk much about bipartisanship. She doesn't seem that interested in appealing to Republicans, which you have to do in Texas. So yes, I would say that every combination has its own sort of likelihood, but there's some clear combinations of candidates here that are going to be way closer than others.
The State of the Union.
Our nation is back.
At only 1 hour and 48 minutes, audiences
Suffered terribly for a long time.
and we're left demanding more.
People are asking me, please, 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 Mr. President.
And so, by popular demand, introducing the 4-hour Director's Cut. It's
bigger than ever.
Now, with 12 more minutes of demanding the Democrats stand up.
You should be ashamed of yourself. Not standing up. How are you not standing? Look, nobody stands up.
18 more minutes of chanting at hockey players. And a full half hour of Derek Van Orden not getting a handshake. It's so awkward, you'll be screaming.
We can't take it anymore.
The State of the Union Director's Cut. Yours for
The lowest price anywhere in the world is $1,775.
Actually, make that
One more dollar, I said $1,776.
And that is it for another trip to Planet America. If you did miss last week's State of the Union live special, it is now slightly less live on ABC iView and online.
And we're going to be back here at the slightly later time of 9:50 p.m. next Monday on ABC TV. And don't forget the PEP podcast, where we talk a whole lot more about the Texas primaries. We'll see you there. Bye.